Okay, comic books part 3. We have going to look at Jack Kirby a little while. I talked about the Incredible Hulk on one video, and then the Fantastic Four, and he's an integral part of the Fantastic Four because many people will contend that the Fantastic Four, which started in 1961, and whose book was canceled finally in 2015, but that it was really a reformulation of Challenges of the Unknown from DC Comics. And probably that was true, but if you read the 1960s Fantastic Four, and I have most of those, I have all of the Fantastic Four from number 50 to the present, or May 2015 when it was canceled, and I have most of the reprints before that, and some originals. It became, at least up until right before Jack Kirby quit, then it wasn't so much, but it became very esoteric, cosmic, like they used to say cosmic. And I don't know if everybody at Marvel was too keen on that, and for whatever reason it seemed like there was a falling out between the Marvel establishment and Jack Kirby, and he decided he would go to DC in 1970. And then he jumped back and forth between Marvel and DC throughout the 70s and 80s, and then he died in 1994. Seemed like everywhere he went there were problems, and it could have been a personality issue, but I think it was more so that he wrote such, because once he left DC and joined DC in 1970, he did all his own writing, and his writing was very strange and, like I said, esoteric and very creative. The artwork was dynamite, although it did decline throughout the 70s, 80s, and then up till he died. And I think that, to a large extent, was due to him just wearing out his hands. He probably had arthritis, and I mean, most artists would be happy to do one comic book a month, and if they could make the deadline. Sometimes they'd miss the deadline, and Marvel would be forced to publish a reprint, which was very irritating to them. But Jack Kirby would do a comic book in 2 days. So he was putting out this huge volume of material, and he was very reliable in that sense. But his books tended to be bad sellers, I think. He would jump from place to place or title to title, and they just did not sell, and people couldn't figure them out. I remember 1977 reading Machine Man and thinking, wow, this artwork is really different. I mean, I'm saying so much the story was, but the artwork was so much different than the other things that were out there. And I still think that today. So we can't go into everything he did. He did so much. Like Black Panther, he did a good run on Captain America, but the stories were so bizarre. I think finally the editors said, get him off of it, get him off. Captain America's supposed to be a guy fighting villains and being patriotic, and now he's out there fighting aliens and these strange creatures from swamps and these strange plot lines that seem to have a hidden meaning. And then he did Devil, Dinosaur, and Moon Boy, another oddity. He did Commandy at DC in the mid-70s, which was a takeoff of Planet of the Apes. That was more, I think DC told him, want like a kid-oriented book about animals that can talk. But then that had a strange background because it was OMAC. Turned out Commandy was from Command D, an underground bunker, and that he was the son of the one-man Army Corps, OMAC. So that was a book that was out, and so even that had a peculiar background. And then he, like I said, at Marvel, then he did the Eternals at Marvel, another one of these very, and some people said that, and I read a good essay on the internet, that Kirby was very involved with the Kabbalah and the occult and Thelema Thelema, Aleister Crowley, and that they showed that there were a lot of thematics there, like Silver Star in the 80s. They said Silver Star was like an English translation of the Journal of Aleister Crowley. He did Captain Victory over there too with Pacific Comics in the 80s. Those are very peculiar books. I have them all of them. He did, like I said, Black Panther, and then he did the Eternals. The Eternals is very hard to figure out. He did the 2001: A Space Odyssey. He was very big into Stanley Kubrick, and so he did the big Treasury size, magazine size edition, which basically was verbatim from the novel more so than the movie. Then he developed it into 2001: A Space Odyssey, and then that became Machine Man. It just became Machine Man, a different title. And I have all that stuff: Devil Dinosaur, Black Panther, all the Captain America, everything he did. Basically, I have everything he did from 1970 onward, and except for the Days of the Mob and that other, what was it, horror book. Those were done in magazine size black and white because they weren't following the comics code, because I think they had a lot of violence and everything in them. But the thing that probably he's most famous for, and I want to show you this, and they had such repercussions in that throughout the 70s, 80s, and into today in DC. Not so much today, maybe. They're more worried about politically correct stuff today. It's like they spend more time worrying about who's going to be a new black hero, or this one's gay. You know, it's like, don't worry about the stories. Don't worry about the crummy art. And what DC will do, I noticed this, they'll have like a 6-part series today. A story, be 6 parts. But there'd be nothing to it. It'd be like what they used to do in 1975 would be a 17-page story. And they'd draw it out to 6 issues. So they're just very lazy about it. I keep the comics coming in just to perpetuate the collection, but they're very poor. So they'll do really writing 2 stories a year, maybe 3, and they're just dragging them out. So, but in the old days, they didn't do that. They would pack a lot of action into 17 pages or 20 for it. Then it dropped with inflation. You know, they had to cut back with government inflation. But here's where it started. 1970, DC had been promoting this for months. Kirby is coming, and then he came out, of all things, Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen. An old book from the 50s like Lois Lane. That was just standard, straight standard comic book stuff, right? So then, I don't know what DC was thinking, like, oh, he's going to revitalize these books. He comes out with Kirby is here, Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen. And I think the DC editors were horrified. They said, this doesn't look like Superman. And they even got somebody to go back and draw Superman's face. They would erase what Kirby drew, kept his body, but they would draw his face. Because Kirby was a very strange artist. And but they bought the farm, so they had to deal with this now. So Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen with the Newsboy Legion, he's bringing back all these old 1940s and 50s kid groups he used to love to write about. These like the Bowery Boys type thing. And then you see Kirby's famous for his splash pages. Always these big splash pages with super intricate detail. And he was so interested in modern technology and machinery. And so they introduced Morgan Edge, who is an Earthling, but he's working for this secret dimension, the Fourth World, and the planet Apocalypse. Now Morgan Edge is black, you know. Too many whites in DC, but you know, that's a different argument in story. But and then there's a whole biography of Kirby in here. Jack Kirby continued. And there's you know, there's motorcycle gangs and people living in these elaborate treehouse communities, and Kirby was very interested in the hippie world and New Age philosophy. And then he did, and this is just the first issue. I have all the ones he did, you know, with the Superman's pal. Jimmy Olsen. And then they also came out with the Forever People of Supertown, and they would ride on these really fancy four-wheelers, three-wheelers. The Forever People was sort of like the hippies, the space age, new age hippies. And they had people like Beautiful Dreamer, and they would come to Earth in a boom tube, and they called it a boom tube, and they would talk to this little machine called a mother box, where they would communicate and it would tell them things that they needed to know. And so it says, try the boom tube if you dare. So, the Forever People. And I've read them all, I have them all. And then Mr. Miracle, this was more standard. He was from Apocalypse, and he was related to the ruling families, whatever. No Trap Can Hold Him, Mr. Miracle, which I think was the best selling of these. And you can see a lot of Vince Coletta inking. And then later Mike Royer did a lot of the inking. And the main frame of the whole deal was, and it was all, this was the axis of it, oh, here's another Jimmy Olsen. You see with the motorcycle gangs and the space people. I have to make sure I put these in order. Well, that's 134. That wasn't the first. The one I showed you wasn't the first one. I had them out of order. 135. Yeah, and they had a lot of Neil Adams art on the cover because Neil Adams was famous for his cover art and inside art, but he was more into commercial art. He didn't stick with DC for that long. He was doing other things like inventing the Camel, Joe Camel, cigarette companies. But here's the New Gods, 1970. Kirby is here. And there's Orion. A lot of people, or some people, have theorized that 7 years later, Star Wars was almost a ripoff of the Fourth World Tetralogy. And when you read the New Gods, you can sort of believe it because it's all about this overriding power that guides the people of the Fourth World and Apocalypse, and it's called the Source. And then there's a guy who decided to follow the evil side of it. He's called Dark Side of the Source. And all the wicked people are with him, and his planet that looks a lot like the Death Star, except this is 1970, not 77. And then his archenemy is Orion. You see Dark Side and Desaad and Desaad, and there's Orion. See the dreaded fear machine, and then here's the Black Racer. Is he after Orion or you? And then of course you see Kirby did he used to do the pictographs, photographs with comic book drawings pasted over them. And if you look inside of these splash pages, they're pretty incredible. And then of course the mob. Jack Kirby always wanted to have stories about the mafia, organized crime. See the mutate monsters unleashed on the seas of Earth. Even his writing was so stilted and peculiar. I like his writing, but it's very strange. It's so unlike other comic book writing. The people speak in an odd way. Everybody speaks in a strange way in the books. But in an interesting way, here's Light Ray. When the storm of battle is over, who will be left on the glory boat? And then The Legend of the Silent Bear, all these, and these were very thick books with all sorts of strange things. Read The Death Wish of Terrible Turpin. And then this is a typical Kirby like dialogue. I'm placing you under arrest, even if I die for it. This is Turpin. He's like the cop, the tough cop. And Orion says, "Stay back, you men. It's forbidden to interfere in personal combat." So what I mean, everybody was speaking this like grand, eloquent way, no matter what they were doing. Like maybe they were changing a tire on the car, and they would speak in that excited, grand, eloquent manner. A stranger from the strangest land ever seen, the bug. You see, and there's light ray in the bug, and oh, and Kirby did the demon. Can't forget about that very strange witchcraft book. And then you got other stories. And then it only lasted, Calabac, yeah, the big bruiser. It only lasted 11 issues, and DC canceled, like in 1 month, they canceled all the titles. And then they brought Superman's pal straight back to regular old traditional comic stories. The fans were just not digging it, and Kirby, I think, was pretty irritated. And then he did some other books, and The Demon and Commandy was fairly popular. Sandman wasn't. He did some other launches. Those didn't make it too well. And then he went to Marvel, and that didn't work out because he continued doing this strange, bizarre thematics. And he just wasn't going to stop doing that. And he did that up until, I guess, he couldn't go anymore. He was very old and sickly. Not real old, but in his 70s, sickly. He died of a heart attack. The most famous story, I think, is number 7. What is it? The Pact? Is this number 7 where it was in there? Where it explained the whole idea of the Fourth World. Jack Kirby called it the Fourth World. And yeah, in the beginning. And it's all about how they had Orion and why he was fighting Darkseid and what Highfather had to do with everything. And the story turned out that Orion was, in fact, the son of Darkseid. And it's like a scene in there where Darkseid's basically saying, Orion, I'm your father. You know, and he can't believe it, you know, and it turned out that they had made a trade to prevent the destruction of eternity, and it was called the Pact. And that's the very famous splash page of the Pact. And it explains all the, and Highfather would be like your Obi-Wan Kenobi type character, I guess. And no one can say that they stole it, the idea, but there seem to be so many parallels. And I'll give you one little, then I'll close this up, more or less. It says, and it's showing the history. No, you've no lack of confidence, I'll say that for you. What's that you hold? He's telling this to Darkseid. A small metal block, sire. He's telling this to his master at the time. You see, I spend time with our technicians. It occurred to me that in this new age, we must seek new roads to tread. Thus, in this small product, we may have found one such road. This contains a new but unstable element created by accident here on Apocalypse. And then the man says, the block fades from view, it vanishes. Fear not, see, it returns. Now, wouldn't it be nice if we found the one being who could harness this for Apocalypse? And then it goes on, you know, and there's all these strange background stories about what led up to the Pact and these cosmic battles. And well, of course, I love it, but and then his Darkseid's game is not mine. Where is Isaiah? Where is Isaiah? Obviously, Isaiah. You know, Kirby's going to use a lot of Jewish mysticism. Hate is no longer a word in this place. Put down that weapon, son. You are my father? Only if you wish me to be. I am Highfather. And you are Orion. We have need of each other, Orion. This is a place of friends. Here is my hand. No, and then, you know, he's talking to Orion about what really happened. So, and then there's a lot of great reprints of old Simon and Kirby stuff from the 40s and 50s, The Manhunter and all that. So, these books got to be hard to find. They're in great shape. great shape, the ones I have. So if you find them, you're lucky, but you're probably going to have to pay a pretty good amount. He did do one really fantastic, well, he did a lot of fantastic things back at Marvel, but one of them was the silver. Oh, he went back to DC, and in 1984, they decided to redo the New Gods and finish it up, because they ended the story so abruptly, just number 11. And he did a few of these. This was original material in here. They reprinted the original 11, and then he came out with a graphic novel called the Hunger Dogs, and I have that down there. The Hunger Dogs is painted, all hand painted, not typical comic book colorized or color processed. So that wrapped up the New Gods saga, I guess you'd call it. That was in 1984, the Hunger Dogs graphic novel. Here's one of the earliest graphic novels from 1978. Kirby and Stan Lee, it kind of worked out their personal issues, and they decided to do the Silver Surfer story in a huge, no advertisement. There's a hardcover. I only have the soft cover. And this is over 100 pages of pure comic, and it's called The Silver Surfer. And it's a novel-size comic book. And it's all about the Silver Surfer and the new Herald of Galactus named Ardina. You see the woman on the cover. And has some really interesting artwork in it. And I think one of my favorite scenes, let's see, Kirby was starting to kind of get stiff, you know, in 1978. His hands were starting to wear out. But this is a great, he still could do great work. Here's a great scene where Galactus hits him with these eye rays over New York City, always over New York City. And you see him falling back into the background, where they're looking down onto the city. Kirby always would bring in interesting viewpoints, looking down onto the city from straight above. You see him disappear with his board on the roof. And same kind of, they say Stan Lee wrote this. I think Stan Lee would kind of write the dialogue according to what he kind of figured Kirby was going at. At last we meet. I am Ardina. The moment has been decreed by destiny. My sense is real. You are beauty, beauty beyond measure. So, but anyway, that's that. I could go on forever with all of this, you know. So thank you for watching this. I gotta show it a little more. Thank you for watching this comic book video.